again, everyone. I'm Robin Roberts in New York. On today's show, we'll bring you live coverage of the Santa Anita Derby presented by Visa. And we'll revisit our old friends, the Harlem Globetrotters, in our Wide World Classic. But first, we begin our Valvoline Professional Boxing Series this month with our first visit to South Africa in almost 2 decades. Today, America's 1988 Olympic champion, Kennedy McKinney, tries to win back his IBF junior featherweight crown he lost to Vuyani Bungu in 1994. Now let's join Dan Deerdorf and Alex Wallo, who are standing by almost 8,000 miles across the Atlantic in South Africa.
Johannesburg at night, a new city barely 110 years old that sprang up on these high plains because of a gold rush in 1886. We're about 150 kilometers north of Johannesburg in Hammanskraal at the Carousel Casino, and we're inside a tent that you'll see looks a little bit like the Denver airport. The crowd inside is pumped because a local hero of theirs is about to take center stage. It's the Valvoline Professional Boxing Series, the IBF Junior Featherweight Championship between Kennedy McKinney and the champion, Vuyani Bungu. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dan Deerdorf, and welcome to South Africa. I want to take this opportunity to welcome the folks at Valvoline, who are going to be our title sponsor for the balance of the 1997 boxing season. It ought to be a fun ride. I'd like to take this opportunity now to bring in my partner, Alex Wallo. And Alex, you and I have covered a lot of the globe to see some fighting. This is the first time we've made it, though, to the continent of Africa.
And Dan, we are here to cover just a boxing match, but it is impossible to come to South Africa and not think of larger issues. Despite the monumental changes in recent years, and despite the great hope for the future, when you think of South Africa, you are flooded by an endless series of negative images from the not-so-distant past. Apartheid, 44 years of institutionalized segregation. A nation scarred by horrific violence and injustice, the devastation of which still echoes through South Africa today. As the Afrikaner government's total disregard for human rights became uglier, the world joined in black South Africa's fight for freedom. The sporting world led the international community in sanctions that imposed social and economic pressure on the ruling regime. Barring South Africa from international competition was a blow to the sports-loving Afrikaners' greatest source of pride.
The sports boycott in particular was a necessary instrument in the direction of exerting more and more pressure from the outside world, reinforcing the struggle that was going on inside the country.
The only international sport that continued in South Africa was boxing, because some of the world governing bodies of the sport sanctioned fights there. Boxing was the one sport in South Africa that had earlier been allowed to cross the legal barriers based on color.
And the gong sounds the start of this history-making boxing match. Not only a world title fight, but the first confrontation between a black man and a white man in a professional sporting event in South Africa.
Some apartheid opponents said this token integration allowed the government to avoid real change. But for the black boxers, the victories were a source of honor and pride. One man who embodied honor and pride for black South Africans competed as an amateur boxer in his youth. Nelson Mandela later emerged as one of the leading voices for change in South Africa and was targeted for years by the government until he was finally sentenced to life in prison. But Nelson Mandela refused to break. He became South Africa's symbol of peace and hope. By 1990, change was inevitable, with only 16% of the country's population white and economic and social isolation immobilizing the country. Nelson Mandela was set free after 27 years. 2 years later, apartheid was abolished.
Today, we have closed the book on apartheid, and that chapter is finally closed.
Integration in sports is a symbol of the new South Africa.
Sport in general has that capacity to break those artificial walls that have kept the people of this country apart. You take those young men into that ring, they immediately forget about their cultural, linguistic, or even racial backgrounds. They see themselves as athletes. That's what apartheid had denied them for very many years in the past.
Many South Africans believe the sports boycott played a role in the transition to democracy, and it would be wonderful if it played a role in the reconciliation and the healing process as well. Dan?
Nicely done, Alex. Well, the crowd is pretty excited. They know the main event is right around the corner. They're rooting for their hometown hero, Vuani Bungu, the IBF Junior Featherweight Champion. He's making his 8th title defense. He resides in East London, which is down on the southeast coast of South Africa. And he posts a lofty 31-2 record. He has won 12 fights in a row. The challenger is already up in the ring. That's Kennedy McKinney. He's the former IBF champ. He lost his title 2.5 years ago. He was born in Mississippi, grew up in Memphis, but now calls Las Vegas home. He has a record of 32-1. Well, both Bungu and McKinney have been on the boxing scene for over a decade, but really more so for Kennedy McKinney, it has been a very up and down ride.
Kennedy McKinney first made a name for himself as an amateur boxer at the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, where he put on a tremendous performance in the finals to become the first American boxer in 84 years to capture the bantamweight gold medal. He turned pro the next year, but his career seemed over almost before it began. 2 trips to rehab for cocaine addiction, then a positive drug test and a 6-month suspension. But he battled back, resumed his career, and in 1992 challenged South African Welcome Nita for the title. Round 11, well behind on points, McKinney seemed on the verge of getting knocked out. But he recovered, and later on in the same round, needing a knockout to win, McKinney unloaded that classic right hand that resulted in a 1-punch knockout and a world championship belt. He successfully defended his title 5 times before taking on another South African, Vuani Bungu. At the time, Kennedy was unbeaten and considered one of the best fighters in the world, and Bungu just another stepping stone. But the unheralded South African upset the odds, out-hustled and outboxed the champion to capture a unanimous decision and return the title to South Africa. It was a convincing win, but Vuani feels he still has something to prove.
You know, when I did training, you know, the people, you know, didn't believe it, you know. So that's why I'm saying it's a big fight here, because they wanna prove it, whether it was a fluke or what, and I'm gonna prove them wrong, you know.
This guy was never supposed to beat me. I'm 31 years of age now, and so I'm getting up in age. I ain't gonna say I'm old, but I'm getting up in age for this sport. But I just need to go out and prove myself. I need to prove it to me that it was a fluke, which I know it was, because I didn't give my best effort in training. The training is where I lost the fight at. I didn't lose the fight in the fight. I lost the fight in my training. I didn't train right for that fight.
Coming up, the IBF Junior Featherweight Championship right after this.
ABC's Wide World of Sports brought to you by Valvoline Durablend, the #1 selling semi-synthetic motor oil. The Nicoderm CQ Stop Smoking Patch. You bring a commitment, CQ brings the rest. Degree, the body heat activated antiperspirant and deodorant. And Budweiser, Beechwood Age for a crisp, clean, classic taste.
Welcome back to South Africa for the Valvoline Professional Boxing Series, the IBF Junior Featherweight Championship between Kennedy McKinney and Vuani Bungu. Let's take a look at the tail of the tape. You'll see both of these guys very similar. McKinney 1 year older than Bungu. Nobody had problems making the weight, the reach not a factor. The IBF rules are in effect for this afternoon's fight. Scoring is on a 10-point must system. The 3 knockdown rule is not in effect. Neither is the standing 8 count. A boxer cannot be saved by the bell in any round, and only the referee can stop the bout. And the referee for this afternoon's fight is Stan Christodoula. This is his 79th title fight.
And he is one of the very, very best, Dan.
And we are underway in Hammanskraal, South Africa. Vuani Bungu wearing the blue shorts with the stars on them. Kennedy McKinney in the red and the yellow.
Both men notoriously slow starters. McKinney on the right of your screen, the American, lost convincingly in their first fight 3 years ago. Knows he must raise his performance considerably, Dan, in order to come away with the belt. He said he took Bungu too lightly the first time. He has no excuses this time. He's trained hard. He's focused. He knows this is just an absolute must-win for him. Totally a crossroads fight.
He has had to travel many miles to fight Bungu. He fought him and lost his title in this very ring in August of 1994. This fight was originally scheduled for March 1st in Biloxi, Mississippi. Bungu had to postpone the fight because of an injured right hand, something that McKinney vocally disputes.
Both men much more tentative. Bungu especially much more tentative than he was. In the first fight, he jumped right out and went right after the then champion Kennedy McKinney on the right. This time, Liani seems a little bit more tentative. Not as much movement and not as many punches.
He is a fighter that fights from the crouch, so expect him to remain in that stance most of the fight.
You see the head movement he shows there, bending from the waist and then coming up punching.
Good jab there by Bungu.
Right. He is a very difficult opponent, Dan, just to land one punch on, and it is another good jab, scoring a point. And he really is difficult to hit with the combination. The opponent tends to get discouraged. Kennedy McKinney can